James, what I was going to say, what a pleasure, but that sounds canned. But it is a pleasure to see you again.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to be back here talking about not being on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, because I was looking toward, we're going to talk about traveling to Mars today and how we could do it, why we would do it. But I looked back on our previous episode about the miracle of flight and how people are just kind of taking it for granted still. Do you realize that was over half a year ago already?
I honestly have lost all sense of time whatsoever. If I don't have a calendar up telling me what day and month it is, I couldn't even tell you.
Well, luckily, if anybody wants to look it up, it was episode 123. If you want to look it up, it's James and I talking about flight. And we're going to talk about it again today. And I was looking at it because genuinely, I was, I'm wondering, you hear about it's less. I don't see it in the forefront as much anymore, but about traveling to Mars. But in the back of my mind, I don't know about you, but I'm like, why would we do that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the sense of like why Mars. I think there is a good answer to that depending on how you phrase it. Like, why Mars? Or like, why Mars? Or even just like, why Mars, right? Depending on the inflection, there's all kinds of different answers. And I think some of them make more sense than others. Uh, but I love the discussion around it. I love the science. I love the idea of us putting a lot of time and interest and investment in things like space travel. And I'm really excited to chat about it today.
Yeah, I mean, when I was going through it, and I'm gonna throw this name out there because I do like. I'll be honest, I've got two of his books on my table right now. Stephen Hawking. One I thought was very boring and a lot of data to it, but his book called, I think it's the Brief Answers to the Big Questions. But he brought out he proposed how we could do it, and I'm like, that's fascinating. And the way he said it was cool. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But I was I was just wondering, technically, I mean, can we actually get to Mars? I mean, I guess technically, well, like you were saying before, like we were talking off, it depends. A lot of it's financial. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not a rocket scientist here, but I've
But
stayed at a
that didn't
Holiday
take
Inn
long.
Express here or there, and I actually, believe it or not, one of my good buddies in college, his dad is a rocket scientist and was actually involved with some of Buzz Aldrin's stuff about trying to go to Mars. So I have actually had some of these conversations about, and like technically, the big challenge on getting to and from Mars is just throwing a ton of rocket fuel at a problem, right? I don't think that the technical challenges to getting to Mars and spending a little bit of time there and coming back have really been insurmountable since the 1970s or even the
Yeah.
80s, if you're being a little more. I do, yeah, because like you look at the Apollo missions, right? And I think that's the big obvious comparison, right? Is when you're looking at the things that were needed for Apollo. At the end of the day, it was just throw a huge amount of rocket fuel and engineering effort at putting a lot of weight in orbit and then get stuff over to the moon and bring it back. If you just add on to that, you put more weight into orbit, you put more stuff up there, you put more effort into that engineering, I think the actual like problems of getting to Mars, there's nothing that's insurmountable that we've solved in the last, couple of years, and we're like, oh, now we can finally do it. It's not like Mars has some virus on it that we've just come up with a vaccine for, and now we can safely send people. It's just a matter of spending a tremendous amount of time, effort, and money in putting a lot of stuff really, really far away.
Yeah, really far away. I mean, that's one of the things that kind of creeps me out, but we'll get into the creep me out factor later. But I think that's one of the reasons because it's like a two-pronged approach the way that they're talking about now that might help us get like the one prong is NASA, which to me is like, wow, you're still doing NASA? Okay. But but they're doing like, things like the Onion Crew capsule for deep space missions to get out and back. Space Launch Systems, Gateway Lunar Station. I didn't even know right now they've already got it for the Gateway Lunar System's already orbiting the moon and testing Mars relevant systems and mission staging. they want to use, I
Yeah.
think, like the moon as the stage for refueling and whatnot, but also like in situ resource utilization. How about that one? You can so to extract oxygen and water and fuel from the Martian soil and atmosphere, again for sustainability. But uh, but then you have the two-pronged approach because that's NASA's government. And you just when I say that, it feels like we're plodding through. I could just be just a waist-high pile of paper, people trying to plod through and get something done. But then here comes SpaceX. Now, SpaceX is privately funded, and
Yeah.
they can just chuck money at it like crazy, and they go a lot faster. And well, but they're doing stuff too. Like their main thing was like the quote unquote. Well, it's named Starship is their rocket strategy,
Yeah.
their Mars strategy. But
Mhm.
it's already got the massive. You've seen it. You know the massive crew and cargo capacity up to 100 people in
Yeah.
orbit refueling. But what's when I see that, it's like from who? You can, but who's refueling you?
Yeah. Well, I think, when you're describing the public versus private approaches to get into to both Mars and the moon too, even because I think that's a big component of it, right? If you're talking about going to Mars, the first step is you got to go back to the moon for a wide variety of reasons. One of the most obvious ones is you just need to requalify all the technologies that you're going to be doing, and the moon is much easier than Mars, although still a very challenging place to get to. Um, but for both of those, both Mars and the moon, NASA's taking an approach that, at least right now, is kind of a hybrid of that, like public and private approach.
Oh,
So, like
definitely.
when we're talking about the moon, they're actually using the SpaceX rockets as the lunar lander, right? They want to take that Starship, and that's what they are going to land on the moon. They're going to just have that do its controlled descent, and that's going to be what they use as a lunar lander, and then take off again. So I think we're starting to see that NASA is really starting to come into the idea that they've been pushing towards for the last 15, almost 20 years, where they are not going to just be in the business of going to and from low Earth orbit and giving rides up to the International Space Station. They want to start getting into the real challenges, the hard stuff, right? And I think their development with those private companies and utilizing the work that private companies have already done to save some money is, I think, really valuable, right? They don't have to necessarily throw just heaps of money at one of the big engineering firms in order to develop a rocket that has no other use. If SpaceX wants to go out and fund the development of that rocket, and then NASA is just going to take it off the shelf or give them some uh, additional development money to tweak it. I think that's a great idea, and it gives us as both Americans who are paying for NASA, but also just as engineers and people who are taking advantage of the technologies that are developed for this, or bang for a buck. That's a great thing. I see that as a real win.
Yeah, I hope that it sounds like it's some type of collaboration because it's they kind of say that SpaceX focuses on scale, speed, and reutilization, like you're stating with the
Blowing
lunar
up
lander.
rockets.
Yeah, but on the flip side, you got NASA. Here we are again, just trudging right along, focusing on safety and
Yeah.
about the science and the infrastructure. So together, I think it's an interesting. It's also interesting the way you're just talking about, because I'll be honest, I'm a lot older than you, so I was still just blown away. Like, we were just getting on the moon when I was a little kid, but now you're talking about it as like a stepping stone. It's like that's so cool.
I think it should, I'm a little torn on the like Mars versus Moon thing in general, because I do think there's a lot of value in sending people to Mars. They go out there, they plant the flag, they do the photo op, right? They conduct some of that science there on Mars. And the technologies that we're going to develop to do that are tremendously valuable, and they're going to eventually trickle down into the rest of society in ways that we can't even imagine, right?
Right.
That being said, I think the value in staying on Mars with our current level of technology, it doesn't make all that much sense to me. It's really hard to stay on a planet with barely any atmosphere, barely any sunlight, that's really, really far away, and is not really in the temperature range that people can survive in unaided without technology. There's just Mars is not all that much easier to survive on than like the moon. And while there are more opportunities to develop technologies for things like extracting some water or maybe
Yeah.
making rocket fuel on Mars, there's kind of a sense of like why, right? And that's what happened to the Apollo missions, right? People started saying, why are we going to the moon? Why, right? What are we doing up there? At least the moon now has some value as a staging area where you can do some of that technology. You can have people stay in lunar orbit. You can have people in long-term bases that are considerably easier to get to. And if you want to develop those technologies and you want to say, hey, we're going to start assembling deep space rockets. And we want to do it on the moon instead of on Earth because then you're already up there and you have that stuff and you don't have to pay for the energy to get it up into orbit. Like you can do that on the moon. You don't have to do it on Mars, right? And you have opportunities there that I think you don't get necessarily from Mars. And I don't think we're far enough along in our technology to really take advantage of like the long-term benefits of Mars versus something like the moon.
Well, there are, like you say, there's differing, you know, people have to give reasons for it. Like, the search for past or present life. Okay, that's a nice to have, it seems like.
Yeah,
Understanding the geology and the climate history. I can see the value in that because as you want to move forward into like, I think the word is terraforming. You can tell I've been reading this outline. But trying to make Mars into more Earth-like, with the atmosphere and the Earth and the geology. Let's be honest, it also reinforces our leadership in science and technology, which is important as a country. But
yeah,
they talk about long-term survival. And some, other people, they talk about more than one as I'm looking up the information on this, is they're talking about safety from, well, an option because Earth is vulnerable to catastrophes,
yeah.
asteroids, super volcanoes, nuclear war. That's, ecological collapse. So they're calling Mars our backup environment. And like you say, it's really not.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I would it, I don't know if I would call Mars a solid backup, right? I mean, it's like being in the middle of the ocean and someone tossing you a, inflatable ring or something like that and
Yeah.
being like, "Okay, you got this. That's your backup to this cruise ship." Right?
Yeah,
Like
sure.
I
That's a
don't
great
know if I would
analogy.
really.
You
Yeah,
can you can
it's really hard, right?
you'll float for a while. You'll be alive, but you're gonna
Yeah,
die.
exactly, right? You don't have what it takes to really stay alive there long term. I agree, absolutely, right? Like there could be an asteroid that hits Earth tomorrow and humanity's gone, right? That's it. And I recognize that that is something that we should, as humans, like diversify our environments so that that risk is minimized, right? I also think that if we're being realistic, like we are centuries from Mars being somewhere that is even self-sustaining. And when it comes to things like uh, needing a backup planet, I think a lot of the hype behind Mars is a little bit of maybe billionaires kind of saying like, well, maybe don't worry about climate change or something because like we've got this other planet we're going to go like, oh yeah, don't worry about all of these problems that we're not solving. We're going to go to Mars. It'll make everything
Yeah.
better. And
It's
like,
flashy. It sounds great.
yeah, exactly. And it also it lets us, oh, don't worry about our problems. We don't need to fix what's going on with Earth. Like
Yeah.
it is so much easier to fix the problems on Earth than it is to terraform. Like Earth is already good for humans, right? We need to stop the terraforming on Earth to like keep it that way, right? Like climate change is us terraforming it unintentionally, right? We just need to stop that. And then Earth continues to be great for humans, right? That's a lot easier than going to a whole nother planet that doesn't have fossil fuels and energy just literally coming out of the ground and trying to
Uh,
completely change that to work for humans.
Yeah, like I mean, I like how they point out the fact that well, Mars has a 24.6 hour day. So there you go. It's like Earth. That's Well, I mean, even Stephen Hawking's position was that we need to become again, multiplanetary. And the fact, like you were wondering why Mars, and he was like, well, it's just the most realistic target for near future colonization. But just because of relative proximity, and like we talked about potential for terraforming, but it's still
Well,
that
I agree that like Mars is the best option for terraforming in this solar system. Like it by far, Mars is the only good option. Like Venus is literally just like hell when we're talking about like the temperature, the pressure, it's all just incredibly corrosive gases. Mars is about the only other option with any substantial atmosphere over a rocky center that you can actually stand on. The gas giants, out for obvious reasons. Mars is the best option by far, and it's still terrible for humans, right? The
yeah.
atmosphere is less than 1% of Earth's. The sun is not nearly as bright. So you're a lot more limited there. It's much colder. There's much less gravity on Mars than there are for people on Earth. We don't know the long-term effects of spending time in low gravity, right? All these sci-fi writers, they love to sit there and be like, oh, people are going to be thinner and they're going to be that, they're going to be this. Like, maybe your just heart gives out after 5 years of low gravity. We have no idea, right? Um, so there's a lot of challenges that remain to Mars. And I think if you're talking about the challenges of living on Mars, I think you are much closer to describing the same challenges to living on the moon than you are to the challenges of living on Earth.
Well, what you were just saying refers to this one sentence here that I thought was almost comical. It says Mars, it's the least hostile of the other planets and moons, making it the best option for human settlement. Okay.
Exactly.
It's,
Yeah,
it's,
the least hostile, right? It's like, oh yes, we're going to put you in the cage with the least hostile lion. You'll be
yeah.
fine.
It's not that it's tolerable, it's just the least horrible. But
Right.
but that's okay. Let's talk about the creepy factor because I've got to get this out of my system. It's just I mean like maybe it's because I'm like 6'3", 220. So I can't first of all see me squeezing myself into a capsule and not going insane with this like trip to the moon. Then you go to Mars and then you don't even know if you're coming back. It's like and when you get there, like we keep describing it, it's like you don't know how the hell you're gonna live or if you're gonna live. That's just creepy to me. But when you're talking about that, and this is going to get into like, because, there's ways they see, I think because as I read into this or as I read into it, I saw Stephen Hawking mention it about ways to get to Mars. He suggested something called solar sails. Have you heard of something like that?
Yeah, they're really interesting technology. I don't think they're widely considered a great option for like human travel to somewhere like Mars, but they are really interesting technology.
Yeah, it's like it utilizes sunlight to accelerate continuously over long distances. That's why, as I'm saying, like, I'm envisioning that long-term trip. At some point in my back pocket, I'm gonna pull out this sail and I'm just gonna, because I'm almost out of fuel. So I'm gonna put up this sail and I'm just gonna coast my silly ass all the way to the Mars. And
Yeah.
I'll probably
I,
have a good K ration dinner, you know.
I think the idea is not a bad one, right? And the sun gives off these little particles. You put up a huge sail, and then
Yeah.
like those particles hit the sail, and you get a little bit of boom, a little bit of oomph out of it.
And you
Um,
don't need to bring
and you don't
propellant
have to
with you.
bring the fuel, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to get back, you still have to bring that propellant. And
Yeah.
while you can use a solar sail to get back from Mars, you're going towards the sun, and then you're talking about like, it's like sailing into the wind, but much harder. And it's not really a great option there. It's just there's not that much force behind it. So I think if you're talking about like human time frames to get like if you want to send a habitat to Mars and you put it up in out you get it out of Earth's gravity well and you put up a solar sail and you let the solar
Let
sail
her
take it
go.
over
Yeah.
there. Yeah, great, right? You don't have to pay for all that fuel to get up into space into orbit and whatnot. But if you're talking about people, I think nobody wants to take a 3 year trip just to Mars. They want to do that, 6, 9 month time frame. Uh, that's just one way though. That's a long time. And I think the only comparison that makes sense for those kind of time frames are the kind of things that people used to have to do when they were trying to colonize the New World, right? So when Europeans were coming over to the Americas for the first time, it was a month-long journey into who knows what, and a lot of them died, right? Huge numbers of them. There were
Yeah.
some settlements where everybody died. And that was going to a place where people were already living, tens of millions of them were already living just fine, right? And they still died off in huge numbers. You look at that and you say, oh, yeah, we'll just send people to Mars. Like, it's not a good prospect.
No, I mean, it's just, and right now, like we keep hearing, like the main reason is for a safety net for humanity, and
Yeah.
that'll drive fear and probably investments associated with it. Like, hey, I want, or somebody wants to create a legacy with that pile of cash they had laying around. You can say that I supported this and did that, but there's other, like you talked about, the other ways that to get there quicker. There's ion propulsion. Um, charged ions using electric fields to generate thrust. There's chemical propulsion. Again, burning propellants is obvious.
Yeah.
But I think the most interesting one is going to be, unfortunately, it always comes back to nuclear. It's hydrogen using a hydrogen reactor to expel, to gain thrust. So it's much more efficient, less weight than chemical rockets, and a hell of a lot faster. This, according to this, you can get to Mars, like you mentioned, 6 to 9 months, 3 to 4 months using nuclear, but it's pretty
Yeah.
complex.
Oh, absolutely. The complexity there is very high, right? That has never been done. But I think that's what you're describing is the reasons to go to Mars, right? Like we don't know all of the value that the rest of society will be able to capture from the development of technologies like that. But they're huge. And while I'm definitely sitting here saying like, oh, we shouldn't be talking about trying to colonize Mars, right? Or at least not in the short term. I absolutely would say we should be trying to go to Mars, right? Go there, spend a week, walk around, take some selfies in front of
Inevitable, yeah.
the giant landscapes and, fly back. I think that's worth it because you do get the technologies and like NASA does not cost all that much of like the federal budget. It's like a couple percent maybe, and or fractions of a percent possibly. And the value that people get from the technologies that they develop are huge. So like, do we have a good use for a nuclear rocket engine on Earth right now? Probably not. Can we come up with one or come up with uses for the associated technologies that would be required to develop something like that? Absolutely. Right. And we don't even know all the value that can come out of that. So I think it's absolutely a good thing to talk about. Like, well,
Yeah.
how do you do it? What kind of technologies do we need to solve? What are the problems? Like, yeah, solve those, right? We're gonna get the value, even if we never make it to Mars. You're like, hey, we never made it to Mars. We just developed this awesome nuclear rocket engine. Like, great. Like, think of all the engineering that the problems we've solved and the knowledge that we've gained.
And the minds we've inspired. Like we saw like in the 60s and 70s, just people flocking toward STEM research jobs or STEM research degrees. So
Yeah,
now we can get them back. I think, a lot of the young kids or the younger people can start. But like you say, if we do this, let's just say for a decade and not much comes of it, you now look at the base of people educated in science and technology in the United States, in the world, creating things that would never have happened because they didn't have the incentive to go and get those degrees and the excitement to create these things. So just a better life on Earth for us.
absolutely. And I think, you mentioned the value for the world there. I think one of the more insightful things I heard about the Apollo missions, and the Apollo was long gone by the time I was born. But you hear about the way people think about going to the moon and globally. And people don't say, yes, when the Americans went to the moon, right? It's when we went to the moon. It's when
Yeah.
humanity went to the moon. And that's the perspective that people have. And I think that's good. right? And like it was an intentional goal. Granted, it was, part of the space race, but it was an intentional goal the way NASA framed it, that it wasn't just exclusively America made it to the moon. Granted, they got there, they shoved an American flag in the dirt and took those pictures, but at the same time, they're sending out pictures like the blue orb, right? The picture of Earth taken from lunar orbit, just by itself, and they made sure to include perspective of all of humanity there, and I think that's really useful too. Because if you are a kid growing up in a country that doesn't have a space program, or maybe you don't have a lot of opportunity to get into aerospace engineering, right? But you want to be inspired, you are inspired by these things. You go to engineering school and like, oh, great, now you're just stuck working, developing better ways to manufacture things in your country, right? That's helping people
Exactly.
still, and it's a
Yeah.
good thing overall.
It's
I definitely see it as a net positive.
there's no way to manage it. It's just or measure it rather. But but in the end, like I said, like we started off with, is it possible? And yeah, I think it still needs to be, the combination of big money private investors and the stodgy step-by-step safety protocol of the governmental entities. But also, that's we everybody has to understand like these intangible, like we talked about rewards. There's going to be like, I don't know why, but it's going to be some company like I just saw another company out north of Austin called Firefly, and they went to an IPO just 2 days ago, but they've got now billions of dollars of contracts. So it's just like this is
Mhm.
just not already a new industry, for business to get into outer space. But like I think the more important thing is like you and I both touched on is the impact on humanity, and I don't want us to sound like we're too pontificating, whatever the word is, but uh, because we see, let's be honest, it's like we see America first, and we'd be like, yeah, I'll say it, yeah, bitches, where you at? But then they'll be there. It's like that's cool as heck.
Yeah, it is weird to me seeing, like, absolutely, when it comes to developing technologies, like NASA wasn't building rockets, right? They had, Rockwell Aerospace and Lockheed Martin and whatnot building these rockets, right? It's not like NASA is going to the NASA factory to produce a rocket, manufactured by NASA. There's always been these public and private relationships when it comes to developing these things. It is a little weird to me seeing, Elon Musk is the most vocal about this. These billionaires who are talking about funding the missions to Mars for the value of just having a mission to Mars. Because when you do get to Mars, there's a lot of value initially in collecting some Martian dirt, and you bring it back, and then people get to play with the Martian dirt, and it's incredibly valuable and whatnot. But there's no long-term economic value to be gained from Mars, right?
No.
You're not farming there other than for people who you just paid to send over there. It's a lot easier to just not send them there in the first place, right? Same for rocket fuel or water or anything. Like you're doing things just to keep the people you already sent there alive. Like don't send them there. And you save all that money. So like this idea of this private funding for trips to Mars, basically just as billionaire vanity projects,
Yeah, I was
is
gonna
a
go there myself.
really interesting idea, right? And like, I don't mind a billionaire wasting their money on the wasting, right? Their money on developing a bunch of technologies that'll eventually benefit all of humanity, and like we all get some advanced benefits from that. Like, great, sure. It is weird though, like saying like, oh yeah, that's how we're going to go to Mars. We're just going to rely on some billionaire saying that like they want to be the one that funded people staying on Mars long. And once you get there, like, all right, you get to Mars. All right, we're going to build a Martian colony. All right, what are you going to go up there for? Well, Elon Musk told me he'll give me $10 million a year to go sit on Mars. Okay, great. Like, sounds good, right? But like,
Yeah.
why?
You got to, I mean, because as you're saying, I know you're probably thinking it too on a smaller scale, like less for, national or world pride from a country standpoint. It's now like the strength of this corporation that he's building. Like, hey, I put people on Mars. I can get your satellites in orbit around the US. Just, I need your money.
Yeah,
So,
I think it really is like it's like an ego thing in a lot of cases with these. Like, I mean, how many billionaires have their own rocket companies, right? You've got
That's
like
just a couple.
Richard Branson, you got Elon Musk, you got Jeff Bezos. I'm sure I'm missing a slew of. It's like, okay, what you don't feel like you're rich enough unless you've got a rocket company now. Like, is the next step like, oh, you don't feel rich enough unless you have a Martian colony? As far as things for billionaires to spend money on, like you could do a lot worse. But it
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
little odd that that's one of the approaches that's people are kind of banking on for development of like a path to Mars.
I wonder if there's any like relation because I had another episode that where I was still impressed by the philanthropy of the philanthropy. Listen to me, of the philanthropy of the tycoons from the industrial age. Like for example,
Yeah,
Carnegie, and they still have
yeah,
Carnegie libraries all around the country. Why did he do that? But there's still he did that in the
yeah,
1920s. He built his last one in the 30s, I think. I mean, in the small town where I grew up in north central Illinois, we had a Carnegie Library. It was beautiful. It was probably one of the nicest buildings in town.
yeah. I think it really is like them trying to just put their stamp on history, right? Like, are you going to remember who Carnegie is unless he does build Carnegie Hall and the libraries and
Yeah, that's a
all
good
this
point.
investment in these universities? Are you going to remember like, oh, this person was hey, this guy was really rich and good at like building industry? Okay, but like nobody cares 100 years later, 150 years later, right? Alfred Nobel develops dynamite, and at the time people cared, but like you or I wouldn't know his name if not for the Nobel Prize, right?
That's a good
And
point.
I
Yeah.
think there's some value in that. It is interesting to see that instead of oh, I'm going to set up a concert hall for the ages, or I'm going to develop this prize in science or engineering, and it's like I'm going to develop a Martian colony. Like, okay, that's first of all a huge stretch in the amount of money that you have to be able to spend, but also just it's a
Yeah.
really interesting difference in approach.
Well, and if you look at just, again, to bring up his name, but Carnegie Mellon University, we're still benefiting from what they did and what they
Yeah,
see as, their legacy. So it's fine by us. But, and hopefully this, just like you mentioned, the exponential value that they're going to have to, amount of money they're going to have to invest, maybe we'll reap the exponential rewards as a society. You never know.
yeah, right. And again, as far as like billionaire vanity projects are concerned, you could do a lot worse. And I think public policy agrees with that. That's why NASA has goals of getting to Mars as well, right? So if they're able to do it, and then it's worth NASA's money, and if someone else wants to pay to do it on their own, then like sure, let NASA try and work on sending more probes out to the gas giants or the deep reaches of the solar system. Like, go for it, right?
I agree completely. I didn't know we would get here, but I'm glad we did, James, and I'm glad you stopped by today to talk about it. You know what else would make me glad? If we put this clip out and Starlink or Star Talk Radio sees me wearing their shirt that I got down at the Goodwill in Austin because you see me in the shirt. I hope they get something from it too.
Well, it sounds like they didn't get you purchasing a shirt in the first place
Not
from
even in a
them.
roundabout way. But maybe if they're in town, maybe I'll have them on an episode. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't hurt to ask.
Well, James, thank you again for taking the time out today, and thank you everybody if you listened to us all the way through this. I thought it was a pretty fun conversation, pretty informational.
It's been my pleasure. I always enjoy talking with you.
We'll see you next time, my friend.
Have a good one.